Dr. Peter Kreeft, he has this phrase, and he says, and I'm probably going to summarize very poorly, so forgive me. But he says something to the effect of, there's no such thing as sacred and secular. There's only sacred and desacred or desecrated. And in
Wow.
thought, the idea is that like what you're explaining is a holistic human activity, right? We're not just meant to live within the church wall. Like we have daily life. And for the church to be courageous and bold enough to engage in daily life and recognize like, no, like we could, it's really important to have a really nice coffee shop. And I'm not saying the church has to own it, but that should exist within the realm of holistic Catholic life, right? It's not bad to have that. It's actually a function of humanity to be drawn to that, to be engaged by that, and also becomes a communal place. And I think sometimes we get so afraid we draw these big lines, and it's like, well, no, we have sacred things and we have secular things, you know. And even when it comes to like design, like a lot of times over the years, like by God's grace, my like design career has it was flourished or just kind of found root in a very religious setting because it was very connected to the ministry I was doing at a parish and grew out of that. But when I talk to a lot of people who are like, oh, I want to be a Catholic designer, a lot of times I'm like, cool, like do both of those things really well. And don't
Yeah.
try to like put a label in front of it because often when we say I'm a Catholic designer, what we're doing is we're subconsciously saying like design work outside of having a cross on it doesn't have value, doesn't have merit, and isn't glorifying to God, right?
Or it's kind of a cop out of actually having to take the art of design seriously, for example.
100%. Whenever we put the word Catholic or Christian in front of it, again, subconsciously, I think a lot of what happens is we create a subcategory in which the work in under that label is free from being compared or held to the standard of what that label is in the secular world, right? And so we have like Catholic marketing agencies. And it's one thing to say we specialize in helping Catholic entities, that's fine. But often it's, well, we can't compete with marketing agency. Do you know what I mean? Or whatever it be. And I think I'll stop this at a point, but in high school, I was a big punk rocker, loved punk rock music.
You strike me as a punk rocker guy with the tat and the bald head now and the glasses and the whole.
When I had hair, it was green or pink and spiky, and I had a
Sweet.
plaid shirt, the Doc Martens. You know, I was, but I was also like a very like again, I had a great encounter with Christ early on in high school. So like I was in love with Jesus, and a lot of what the soul kind of music I tried to listen to was like Christian punk rock, and it's kind of like interesting, I guess, phrase in itself. But at that same time, it was so fascinating because my wife, we were dating at the time, but she used to work for Capitol Records, and she was involved with a lot of different bands and their kind of upbringing. And there was this common path that bands would claim to be Christian in order to get a following because the level of entry in Christian music was so mediocre that they just had to have some talent and they stood out among Christian music. Because a lot of times we accepted Christian music not because it was music, but because it was Christian, right? I don't listen to it because it's good. I listen to it because I should, that kind of idea. And these bands would gain a following and momentum and get notoriety. And then once they get picked up, they ditch that label because they were using it because it's such a low bar creatively speaking, or at least historically when I was growing up certainly was. And so to that point, you know, Christian artist, Christian musician, I'm not saying there's in specific places which that is a very specific calling, but I think in general, like what about just be a really, really good musician? And if God has you apply that in a religious setting, great. If it's in a quote unquote secular setting, it doesn't matter. You're the Catholic, so you make that setting Catholic when you enter it. You know?
And yeah, it is so well said. And as Christians, we're not called to mediocrity. That's the point in anything that we do, right? That's why we were kind of saying that like mediocrity is sort of hellish, right? We're not called to be between hot and cold. We're called to be either hot or cold. And we have to live in the humility of what that means. That if you have the gifts to do it, do it. If not, it's okay to back out. Or if in the midst of it, your desires are being shifted and you're like, okay, maybe this Christian punk rock thing is the thing that I do and I'm good at, but don't use don't use a Christian label as an instrument for your lack of talent, you know, or desire. Yeah.